So listen, that's kind of a brief rundown of who the Enlisted Leadership Foundation is, the programs that we offer. So with that, I'm going to call Travis to the screen. He should poke himself up or promote himself. Travis, good morning. How are you today?
Hanging in there, buddy.
Fantastic. Well, listen, everyone, I want to take just a quick 30 seconds to introduce one of the newest members to the board of directors of the Enlisted Leadership Foundation. This is Travis Winfield. Travis is a retired command senior chief. He did 24 years in the Navy. He retired as before command senior chief, he was sheriff, master at arms. And he actually spent a little time on, say both sides, right? Sometimes behind bars and sometimes this side of bars. But that's probably a story for another time. But since his retirement, actually before he retired, he was building his real estate business. And since he transitioned a few years ago, he's really started to capitalize, build an entire real estate team. In fact, you can see behind him his little logo, the Winfield Group, and he'll probably touch upon that a little bit more as we go. So Travis, before I give you the floor in a few minutes and you can introduce the rest of your speakers, I just have one question that I wanted to ask you.
What do you got?
I noticed yesterday you asked a question to each of the speakers. And so the one that I wanted to ask you, if there was one thing, if you have some hobby or you have some skill that nobody knows about, what would that be?
Well, much to my dismay, it would probably be the one thing that my stepmother loved, and I do a great impression of a dodo bird.
Do you care to share that?
And I will share that for another day, but I'll give you a little taste of it. It goes a little something like, no, just leave it like that. But yes, my stepmother loves it, so I still do it. It's fun, and I'll embarrass myself more later on.
All right. Well, listen, Travis, from my humble garage, where I'm sequestered, to your office, and to everybody out there, once again, thank you. Welcome to the second day of the Lockdown Leadership Summit.
So it was 1992, September. I had just joined the Navy after, going through pretty turbulent teenage years. I had been through about 17 different jobs from the age of 14 to the age of 19, trying to find my calling. So when I did was in my sophomore year, I got selected into this program to literally learn to fly in a pilot training program in high school. What an amazing experience, because I got to actually spend time with a guy named Colonel Richard Upchurch, who was the first true military man I'd ever come across. This guy commanded respect like no person I've ever come across. And it just really inspired me to go down a different path than I thought I would. So, of course, at the time I was going to be a pilot and do great things of that nature, but I fell in that category where my parents made too much money for me to qualify for financial aid, but didn't make enough to send me to school. So, thinking back to Colonel Upchurch, who, again, he flew fighter pilots in the Korean War in the Marines, and I had made the decision to join the Navy. Now, this was not an easy decision for me because, needless to say, growing up, I always had a challenge with authority. And anybody who has worked with me through my career, it wouldn't be the first time I've been accused that my mouth had always outranked me. And sure enough, coming right out the box in 1992, I ended up going into being an operations specialist, where I checked into my first ship, the USS Ticonderoga, which should date me for people who know that ship. CG-47. So after checking on board, I was so excited. I literally graduated top of my class as an operations specialist. Not that it was my first choice, but it was just something that I got kind of challenged by one of my students that I was with, and I'm graduating honor grad. And so I showed up to the Ticonderoga just so excited and thinking that I was the man. And I did not, and so that was the first time I experienced being humbled and basically knocked down a peg. And so when I first checked on, you can imagine I showed up thinking I was the stuff. and they go, I really checked on it. They go, you know, welcome aboard. Here's your needle gun. See you in the morning. I spent my first 3 months in the Navy on the side of a superstructure of a cruiser in the yards, needle gunning away. And I'm thinking to myself the whole time, what the hell am I doing here? Now, what does that have to do with it? It's because the leaders that I was first approached with, I'm just gonna be honest with you, didn't impress me. They didn't take the time to get to know who I was. That made me a little jaded when I first joined. And, you know, again, I just came out the box and I literally stumbled out the box. You know, all my supervisors, I would, you know, basically mouth off to them. And, you know, I was, you know, when I went to go cranking, you know, the food service time, when I was a food service attendant, I got assigned to the chief's mess, ended up getting fired from it. Because again, I would sound off and didn't really take that humble approach and get it. But again, it went back to the fact that the people that I was working with and the leaders, my immediate supervisors, weren't taking the time to get to know me. And I got frustrated with that because they weren't recognizing what I felt at the time I could contribute. That's okay. I just kept my head down and kept pushing along. But it wasn't until about a year and a half of joining the Navy, I went up, despite my challenges, I still pushed through. I wound up with my mouth getting sent to XOY, disciplinary review board 3 different times. I went to XOY twice, all before disrespect. But despite this, I ended up still getting promoted to E5. Petty Officer Second Class, you don't know. And it was the first time that you get that kind of level of respect where it's kind of the perfect pay grade, right? You're just enough pay grade where you can take the time to, you can pour into others and start your leadership journey, but at the same time, you're not getting all the dirty jobs that come with being in the lower ranks. But still, I did not command the respect. I was still learning my way. I thought I could be a good leader, but you know, just I wasn't ever given the chance. Until one time there was a young first class, his name was OS1 Stayer. I'll never forget this guy. He just got assigned as the leading petty officer for my division. And despite the fact that I did not have the best reputation in my division, he took a chance on me and he fought to have me assigned as the work center supervisor. It was the first time I was ever giving a true leadership role in the military. Now, we talked earlier yesterday about the fact that, you know, what is a title? Do you need a title to lead? And the answer is no, you don't. But sometimes as you're learning to be a leader, you learn that, you know, sometimes you need that position to be able to like sharpen your tools. So the topic, what I want to talk about is relationship-driven leadership. And you'll notice that I talk about when I'm dealing with different leaders, it's all about how you can influence others through relationships. And my experience when I first checked in showed me, I mean, I learned from everybody. I learned what to do and what not to do as a leader. I had good leaders, I had bad leaders. But the one true thing I learned is that the critical foundation for any leadership role is establishing relationships. So building effective relationships can absolutely be critical to your success as a leader. Because as we mentioned yesterday, leadership is nothing but being an influencer and influencing others. So if you take the time to get to know the people you're around, it can truly make all the difference in the world on how you're being perceived and how you're influencing others. You know, once you plant the seed, you got to water it. And that goes with any relationship. Now, relationships can serve you in all phases of your growth. Because remember, leadership is a skill set, but it also needs to be honed. And with leadership, honing it is through learning through relationships and having those relationships that you can rely on, whether it be people that are quote unquote working for you, whether it be your peers or whether it be your superiors. We all have bosses, we all have peers, and we all have subordinates. And I'm going to talk about that here soon. But the big thing is that by establishing relationships with others, especially those that are you're leading, you can really make all the difference in their life as long as you take a few minutes to learn about them. And we all know there's leaders out there that just put their thumb on them and just, think that the best way to do it is just be that tyrant and just bang into them and just order people around, because you're in the military, you should just follow orders. Now, there is a time and place, right? Sometimes especially in the military, sometimes there's a time and place where you just got to say, hey, get this done. But because knowing your employees, your sailors, your soldiers, you can learn how to make them work the most efficiently by having those relationships with them. And it can really make all the difference in the world. So just remember this. I mentioned this yesterday. You can learn something from everybody, but unless you've built that relationship, it's going to be hard for them to let you in. So take the time to get to know them. Go one-on-one. Whenever when I was into the pinnacle of my career as a command senior chief, I always used to sit there and tell them, look, you don't work for me. I work for you. And I want to be a servant leader. Because once you get about it, it's not about you anymore. It's about them. And if you pour into others, and let me just promise you this, you can't fake authenticity. No matter what you do, you cannot fake authenticity. So make sure you're taking the time to be authentic and real with the people around you. This includes your family as well. Now, we talked about core values yesterday. And maintaining those relationships have to do with maintaining your core values too. One of the core values that I value most is courage. Because again, I always encourage the people that I was leading that I want you to have the courage, as was mentioned yesterday, to do the right thing in the absence of authority. But I also encourage them to do the right thing in the face of authority, because that can sometimes be challenging, right? Is speaking up, speaking your mind, making sure that people are aware. Now, remember, there's a certain way to do it. You have to know your audience. But if you have built those relationships with your superiors, as well, if you're doing it reciprocal and with your subordinates, then there's going to be an open dialogue and relationship. And so let's say, for argument's sake, I get out there and I do something and I ask and I put an order out for somebody to do a certain thing, but there's somebody taking that order that knows that it might be dangerous, it might be unethical, it might be illegal, that maybe I wasn't aware of. They need to have the courage to stand up in the face of authority. But that can only be done and allowed to be facilitated if the relationship between all parties are there. And it'll just open the doors to have amazing communication with your organization, where they're going to feel comfortable talking to it. How many of you have a relationship with your parents where you feel comfortable enough to go and talk to them about anything? Because that also is a relationship that you need to nurture with your family, with your wife, with your kids. You can apply relationship-driven leadership to any facet of your life. You know, there's something I learned in the Senior Enlisted Academy that I mentioned yesterday as well, that when it comes to this, when you're dealing with those relationships, people ask me, well, how do you establish those relationships? Well, first off, it's about recognizing how it's done. And knowing that in the relationship, you know, in the Senior Enlisted Academy, you learn there's 3 different phases of building an organization or a team or even a relationship. Think about when you first meet somebody, or you first join a team, or you first join a command, you're forming. You're taking the time to form that relationship, and you're kind of walking around on your tiptoes. And then you might get into the storming phase, where you're feeling more comfortable around the people that you're with, and you might butt heads a little bit and trying to figure out your pecking order in the organization or in that relationship. But then you're going to find that once you've gotten through that and you've recognized that, then you're going to get into the norming phase. And that's where the magic can happen. And that's where you can really get into a good battle rhythm with the relationships that you have, and you can really work on all cylinders. And it can really be an amazing difference in your organization. I also say this, that by building relationships, I learn through those relationships the strengths and weaknesses they have. Because the first thing that I fully advise you to do as a leader is recognize not just your strengths, but recognize your weaknesses. Because I'm a firm believer that the most successful people in the world surround themselves by people who do great at what you suck at. Now, sadly, I suck at a lot of stuff, right? God had a lot of gifts in this world. Some people can build things, fix things, do things. I mean, paint things, sing. I can't do any of that shit. I really can't. The only thing I got is the big hole in the middle of my face. This is all I got. So this is what I work with. But I enjoy doing it. So what do? I surround myself. I build these relationships and I recognize their strengths so I can surround myself by people who do great at what I suck at. And that will allow me to even grow even more and shore up my shortfalls. So with that being said, I always try to be the dumbest guy in the room. You should always try that, right? So find those relationships and always be learning. Find that group of people that know a lot about what you're trying to achieve, and you're going to be able to take off to the moon by learning from those people. That'll leave me with the last thing I want to mention. We have an amazing speaker this afternoon who's going to finish things up. My name is Larry Broughton. You heard me talk about him yesterday. And I got to tell you, one of the most thought-provoking things that he said to me is Larry, quote unquote, said, you need to live your life in thirds. Now, I didn't understand at first what that meant, but once he explained it, it truly was life-changing for me, because it allowed me to recognize that if you live your life in thirds, it breaks it down like this. First, you should always have a mentor. Live a third of your life surrounding yourself by people who've already achieved what you're trying to achieve, whatever goal that is. You know, pick your poison. If you're in the Navy and you're trying to be a Master Chief, well, find those Master Chiefs that you are just inspired by and get involved in their life. And I guarantee you, they're going to bring you up to them. Then don't forget to spend a third of your life with your peers. And your peers include your family. Because with life balance, we forget about that. Sometimes we just get so locked in. And you heard Dave Braun talk about it yesterday, about finding that personal balance. You know, you always feel like you're playing whack-a-mole with different parts of your life. So when you're spending a third of your life, spend a third of your life focused on them, your peers, your coworkers, your family. Don't forget about them, your friends. Because those are the people you can trust to always lean on when you're having challenging times. Last but not least, spend a third of your life focused on bringing people up to where you are. I promise you, there is somebody that wants to achieve what you have achieved, regardless of what stage you are in your life. So pour into others, pay it forward, and you're going to find how rewarding that can be in your life. It can really be life-changing. So if you live your life in thirds, as Larry says, it can really transform how you approach life, how you approach leadership, how you approach those relationships around you. Because I promise you this, if you have amazing relationships around you, there's nothing that can be done. People who know me say, I don't accept no for an answer. I always look for the yes. And by having relationships, you can find that yes, because if you might not have the answer, but if you have enough relationships that you can rely on, they will help you find that yes. So I want to leave y'all with a quote that truly stands out to me as well. And that is, it was by Steve Jobs. He did it at a commencement ceremony. And he says, you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. So you have to trust that the dots will connect somewhere in your future. You have to trust in something, whether it be God, your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever. Because believing that the dots will connect in the future will make all the difference and give you the confidence to follow your heart, even when it leads you off the well-worn path. And that will make all the difference. That's all I have today. I hope at least resonated with somebody. I really thank everybody for joining us here for the Lockdown Leadership Summit. And without further ado, we're going to kick off people who I've just been connected with and getting things rolling in the right direction. So I guess first I'll just throw it out there. If anybody has any questions while I'm bringing in the next people on, I'll be happy to answer them. But in the meantime, thank you so much. And let me go ahead and bring in our next guest.